Have you ever felt completely underestimated in life? Well, that's how Zara felt, but she had a secret weapon that would change everything. Zara's day at Oak Ridge Elementary, and the knot in her stomach tightened with each passing minute. The beads clicked softly as she tilted her head, a sound that had always brought her comfort, like a secret language between her and her heritage. Your story walks with you, her grandmother had told her once, running weathered fingers through Zara's hair. Every braid, every bead, they speak of who you are when words cannot. In the city where they had lived until 3 weeks ago, those words had felt like a gift. Here in Lakeside, they felt like a warning. "Zara, breakfast!" her father called from downstairs, his deep voice reverberating through their still unfamiliar home. The house was beautiful, larger than their apartment in the city, with a backyard that seemed to stretch forever and walls waiting to be filled with memories. But it didn't feel like home yet. Home was the sound of Miss Josephine playing jazz from her apartment next door, the corner store where Mr. Levon would slip extra candy into her bag, the community center where children who looked like her gathered for summer programs. Here, the silence of suburbia pressed in from all sides. Zara descended the stairs, her hand sliding along the smooth banister. She paused at the family photo wall her mother had already arranged, images that traced the arc of their family narrative. Her parents on their wedding day, her father in his fighting prime, arms raised in victory, her mother in doctoral regalia, Zara as a toddler taking her first steps, and at the center a faded photograph of her great-grandmother who had marched with Dr. King and passed down stories of resilience that formed the backbone of their family mythology. In the kitchen, Marcus Williams stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the same precise movements he used in the MMA gym he owned across town. A former professional fighter turned coach, he had the powerful build of someone who still trained daily, but his eyes held a gentleness reserved for his daughter. Scars on his knuckles told stories of battles won and lost, physical reminders of the path he had forged through a sport where few black men had found championship success when he began. "There's my warrior princess," he said, his face lighting up at the sight of her. The nickname had stuck since she was 4, when she had declared she wanted to be both royalty and a fighter, unwilling to choose between fancy dresses and throwing punches. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, sliding a plate of pancakes shaped like stars in front of her. It was their tradition on important days, star-shaped pancakes to remind her to shine. "I guess," Zara mumbled, poking at her food with her fork, creating constellations in the maple syrup. At her old school in the city, most of her classmates had looked like her. Here in Lakeside, their new suburban community, she had already noticed the difference during their neighborhood walks. Yesterday at the community pool, she had been the only black child in the water. She had felt the stares, heard the whispered questions from other kids. Who is she? Did they just move into the Henderson house? Why is her hair like that? "You're quiet this morning," Marcus observed, sitting across from her with his own plate. He cut his pancakes methodically, the same way he approached everything, with calm, deliberate focus. Nervous butterflies or worried dragons? It was another family tradition, this naming of feelings. Butterflies could be ridden out, her father taught her. Dragons needed to be faced head-on. "Dragons," Zara admitted. "Big ones, with sharp teeth." Marcus nodded, taking this seriously. Dragons respect courage. They can smell fear, but they also recognize strength. Her mother, Dr. Amara Williams, entered the kitchen in her hospital scrubs, a stethoscope slung around her neck. As one of the few black female cardiologists at Lakeside Memorial, she navigated her own set of dragons daily. She dropped a kiss on Zara's forehead, her hand automatically checking for fever. A doctor's habit that had nothing to do with illness and everything to do with love. "New beginnings are scary," Amara said, pouring herself coffee into a travel mug. "But they're also where we discover our strength." She squeezed Zara's shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "Remember what Dad always says during training?" "Face your fears," Zara recited, straightening her spine slightly, "and they shrink every time." She thought about the first time her father had taught her to throw a proper punch, how her small fist had seemed so inadequate against the large training pad. "It's not about size," he had told her. "It's about technique, focus, and believing in the power you carry." Marcus nodded approvingly now, his eyes crinkling at the corners. For the past 2 years, he had been teaching Zara the fundamentals of mixed martial arts, not to create a fighter, but to build her confidence and self-discipline. Their evening training sessions in the basement gym had become a sacred ritual, a space where Zara felt powerful and certain. There, the world made sense. There, she was not defined by the color of her skin or the texture of her hair, but by the strength in her stance and the precision of her movements. I packed your favorite lunch, Marcus said, handing her a Wonder Woman lunchbox. Almond butter and honey on that seed bread you like, sliced apples, and a special treat. The special treat was tradition too. A small note with a drawing of whatever challenge he thought she might face that day, transformed into something she could conquer. Once, before a difficult math test, he had drawn a dragon made of numbers, with Zara riding on its back rather than running from its flames. And remember, little warrior, he added, his voice taking on the same tone he used when wrapping her hands before training. Stand tall. Amara checked her watch and grabbed her keys. I've got an early surgery, but I'll be there to pick you up this afternoon. We can get ice cream, and you can tell me everything. She cupped Zara's face in her hands. You come from a long line of pioneers, Zara Williams. First black student at that school, or 100th. You walk in carrying all of us with you. After breakfast, Zara brushed her teeth and gave herself one last look in the mirror. Her uniform, a requirement at Oak Ridge, felt stiff and formal. Navy pleated skirt, white button-up shirt, navy cardigan with the school crest. The beads in her hair provided the only splash of color, the only piece of herself visible in this new costume. As they drove to school, Zara watched the unfamiliar landscape pass by. Lakeside lived up to its name. They passed the gleaming water where sailboats bobbed in the distance, then rows of perfect houses with perfect lawns. Nothing like the vibrant, crowded energy of their old neighborhood. Here, everything seemed spread out, as if each house needed distance from the next. Zara wondered if the people lived that way too, carefully separated, contained within invisible boundaries. Dad? She asked as the imposing brick building of Oak Ridge Elementary came into view. Why did we move here? We were happy before. Marcus's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. We moved for opportunity, Zara. Better schools for you, a bigger practice for your mom, a chance for me to expand the gym. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But also because places only change when people are brave enough to be first. Sometimes being first is hard, but it makes a path for others. Zara absorbed this, recognizing the weight in his words. She thought of the stories he'd told her about being the only black fighter in his early competitions, how he'd endured slights and outright racism to build his career. What if I can't find my place here? She whispered, her deepest fear finally finding voice. Marcus pulled into the drop-off lane and turned to face her. Your place is wherever you stand, Zara. The ground beneath your feet becomes your place when you claim it. He reached over to straighten her cardigan. And you never have to find your place alone. You carry us with you, all the stories, all the strength, all the love. As they joined the line of parents and children moving toward the entrance, Zara felt the knot in her stomach loosen just slightly. She caught her father watching her and straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin as she'd been taught in training. The beads in her hair clicked with the movement, a small chorus of ancestors reminding her of who she was and where she came from. She was Zara Williams, daughter of a fighter and a healer, carrier of stories, reluctant pioneer. Today was just the beginning of her own hero's journey, though she didn't know it yet. In this ordinary world that felt anything but ordinary to her, the call to adventure waited just beyond the heavy school doors. Zara's first 2 weeks at Oak Ridge Elementary passed in a blur of new routines and cautious exploration. Each morning, she donned her uniform-like armor, the beads in her hair, a quiet rebellion against the school's cultivated sameness. The hallways gleamed with trophy cases and framed photographs of alumni. Nearly all white faces staring back at her from behind glass, silent witnesses to the school's long history. In these polished corridors, Zara felt like a disruption in the narrative, a character who had wandered into the wrong story. Ms. Chen, her fifth-grade teacher, was a bright spot, a Chinese-American woman whose gentle smile suggested she understood something about being other in spaces not designed for difference. She had complimented Zara's braids on the first day and assigned her a seat next to Lily Foster, a quiet girl with kind eyes who shared her colored pencils without being asked. In this classroom, Miss Chen had announced on that first morning, we celebrate what makes each of us unique. Our differences aren't obstacles. They're gifts we bring to our shared table. The words had warmed Zara temporarily, but stepping outside the classroom was like moving between worlds. In the cafeteria, on the playground, in the echoing gymnasium, unspoken rules governed who sat where, who played with whom. Invisible boundaries that everyone but Zara seemed to understand instinctively. A few classmates had made small overtures of friendship. Jamal, whose parents had immigrated from Egypt, occasionally joined her at lunch. Emma, with her stutter that emerged when she was nervous, sometimes walked with Zara during recess. But there was also Madison Baker and her circle of friends, girls whose families had attended Oak Ridge for generations, whose names graced donor plaques and building wings. They regarded Zara with thinly veiled disdain, a foreign element in their carefully curated social ecosystem. Madison was the undisputed queen of the fifth grade, golden-haired, confident, dressed in the same uniform as everyone else, but somehow making it look like designer fashion. Her father was the mayor of Lakeside. Her mother chaired half the committees at Oak Ridge. When Madison whispered, others listened. When she laughed, others joined in, even when nothing was funny. The tension that had been building like a thundercloud finally broke on a crisp autumn day, 14 days after Zara's arrival. The air carried the sweet decay of fallen leaves, and the maple trees that ringed the playground blazed crimson and gold. Zara sat beneath the largest maple, its branches creating a cathedral of color above her. In her lap lay her favorite book, Ancient Warrior Queens, Women Who Led Armies and Empires, a birthday gift from her father. She was deep in the story of Queen Amina of Zassau, who had led her cavalry into battle in the 16th century when a shadow fell across the page. Looking up, she found Madison standing over her, flanked by two friends, Brittany and Sophia, their nearly identical blonde ponytails swinging in unison. "What's with your hair?" Madison asked, her voice pitched to Carrie, ensuring an audience for whatever was about to unfold. Several children playing nearby slowed their games, watching with wary interest. "It looks weird with all those beads. Don't they get tangled or dirty?" The question was shaped like curiosity, but delivered like an accusation. Zara felt her chest tighten, recognizing the moment for what it was. Not a genuine inquiry, but a public marking of difference, a spotlight thrown on what made her not one of us. Zara's hand instinctively went to her braids. The intricate pattern her mother had taught her represented their family's West African heritage. She thought of the generations of women who had sat between their mother's knees, learning the art of braiding as stories were passed down, history preserved in patterns. She thought of how her own mother had described the tradition. This is how we carry our ancestors with us, even when we walk new paths. "It's not weird," Zara said quietly, though her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if the others could hear it. "It's traditional." Madison's eyebrows rose, her mouth curving into something between a smile and a sneer. "Traditional like primitive? My mom says people should try to fit in when they move to nice neighborhoods. You know, make an effort." Her gaze flickered to Zara's book. "What are you reading anyway? Something for school?" Before Zara could answer, Madison plucked the book from her hands, flipping through it with exaggerated disinterest. "Queens with spears? That's what you're into? Weird." She handed the book to Brittany, who giggled on cue. Something cold settled in Zara's stomach, a weight like stone. She recognized the challenge for what it was, a test, a boundary being drawn between belonging and exclusion. In that moment, standing beneath the maple tree with autumn light filtering through leaves the color of flame, Zara faced her first real battle in this new world. Not a physical threat that could be countered with technique, but a social aggression designed to establish hierarchies, to put her firmly in her place, which Madison was making clear was somewhere on the margins. "Give it back, please," Zara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Madison held out her hand and Brittany reluctantly returned the book. "You should read something more normal," Madison advised, her tone suggesting she was doing Zara a favor. "If you want to make friends here, you might want to try being more like everyone else." She glanced meaningfully at Zara's braids. starting with that hair. The bell rang, signaling the end of recess, saving Zara from having to respond. As the students filed back toward the building, she remained under the tree for a moment longer, her fingers tracing the embossed title of her book, anchoring herself in the familiar when everything else felt suddenly strange and hostile. That afternoon, Zara was uncharacteristically quiet during their drive home. When Marcus asked about her day, she gave short, non-committal answers, looking out the window at the perfect houses with their perfect lawns, wondering if perfect children lived inside them. Children who never had to defend their hair or their heritage. At dinner, she picked at her food, the conversation between her parents washing over her like background noise. Amara noticed, of course, her mother missed nothing, but didn't press, giving Zara space to process whatever was troubling her. In their basement gym that evening, Marcus noticed her distraction during their warm-up exercises. The basement had been transformed into a training space with mats covering the floor, a small, heavy bag hanging in one corner, and mirrors along one wall. Here in this sanctuary, Zara had always been able to leave behind the outside world, to focus only on her breath, her form, the discipline of the practice. Tonight, though, Madison's words echoed in her head, disrupting her concentration. When she missed a simple combination they had practiced dozens of times, frustration welled up inside her, hot and unexpected. "Your mind is somewhere else, little warrior," Marcus observed, holding the training pad steady as she tried again, her punches landing with more force but less precision. "Anger makes your strikes stronger, but it costs you technique. Balance is everything." The story spilled out then. Madison's comments, the stares, the whispers about her being different. As she spoke, the words came faster, like water through a breaking dam. She told him about the cafeteria table that had suddenly become full when she approached, about the gym teacher who had mispronounced her name every day, despite corrections, about Madison's suggestion that she change her hair to fit in. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression grave but unsurprised, as if he had been waiting for this moment, knowing it would come. When she finished, he set the pads down and sat cross-legged on the mat, gesturing for her to join him. This was their way, to sit eye to eye when important things needed to be said. No hierarchy, just truth between them. "Zara, there's something you need to understand," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "What you're facing, it's not fair and it's not right, but it's a reality that many people who look like us encounter." She thought of the ease with which Madison moved through the world, the assumption of belonging that came with being the default, the norm. "It's not fair," she repeated, the words inadequate to the weight of the feeling behind them. "No, it's not," Marcus agreed, "and you have every right to be angry. But what matters now is what you do with that anger, how you respond to the challenge." "So what do I do?" she asked, needing a solution, a specific technique like the ones he taught her for defending against various attacks. Marcus's eyes held hers steadily. "That's something you'll need to discover for yourself," he replied. "This is your first real test, Zara, but it won't be your last. I can't give you a roadmap because each journey is different." Disappointment washed through her. She had wanted an answer, a clear path forward. "But," he continued, seeing her expression fall, "I can remind you why we train. Not to hurt others, but to know our own strength. Here," he touched her arm, "and more importantly, here," he pointed to her heart. "The disciplines I teach you in this room aren't just about physical technique. They're about knowing who you are when challenges come, about standing your ground without losing yourself." He looked around the basement gym, at the inspirational quotes he had painted on the walls, at the photographs of fighters who had overcome incredible odds. "Everything in your life so far has been preparing you for moments like this." In the silence that followed, Zara thought about the warrior queens in her book, how they had faced armies and empires with courage and strategy. She thought about her great-grandmother marching for rights despite dogs and fire hoses. She thought about her mother navigating a profession where she was often the only black woman in the room. "This is your journey now," Marcus said finally, his voice carrying both pride and concern. "And I believe you're ready for it. The question is, do you?" For the next few days, Zara moved through Oak Ridge Elementary like a ghost, present but barely seen, careful to occupy as little space as possible. In class, she kept her hand down even when she knew the answers. In the hallways, she walked close to the walls, making herself small. At lunch, she chose a table in the corner, her back to the room, a book propped open before her, a shield against unwanted attention. Her morning routine changed. The beads that once adorned her braids now stayed in a small wooden box on her dresser, keepsakes from a self she was trying to leave behind. She pulled her hair back into a simple ponytail, tight and unremarkable. In the mirror's reflection, she practiced making her face blank, expressionless, a canvas that invited no comment, no notice. "You're quiet these days," her mother observed one evening as they prepared dinner together. Zara methodically chopping vegetables while Amara seasoned chicken for the stew they were making. "Is everything all right at school?" "It's fine," Zara replied, the lie sitting uncomfortably on her tongue. She had never kept secrets from her mother before. But how could she explain that she was learning to disappear? That she had discovered it was easier to erase parts of herself than to defend them? Amara studied her daughter, noting the missing beads, the subdued demeanor. She placed a gentle hand on Zara's shoulder. "You know you can tell me anything, right? Whatever's happening, we face it as a family." Zara nodded, focusing intently on the carrots under her knife, unwilling to meet her mother's eyes lest the tears threatening at the corners of her own spill over. "I just want to fit in," she whispered, the words barely audible above the sound of the knife against the cutting board. "Ah," Amara said, and in that single syllable was a world of understanding. She turned back to the chicken, giving Zara space. "Did I ever tell you about my first year of medical school?" Zara shook her head, though she had heard many stories of her mother's journey to becoming a doctor. "I was the only black woman in my class," Amara continued. "There were days I thought about quitting, about finding some easier path where I wouldn't always stand out, always have to prove myself." She paused, her hands still moving confidently through their work. "I even straightened my hair for a while, thinking it would help me blend in." This was new information. Zara looked up, surprised. Her mother's natural hair had always been a point of pride, a crown she wore unapologetically. "What made you stop?" Zara asked. Amara smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I realized I was exhausting myself trying to be someone else. And even with straight hair, even speaking their language and wearing their clothes, I was still me underneath. Still different. Still the girl whose grandparents had picked cotton before picking up books." She wiped her hands on a towel and turned to face Zara fully. "The energy I spent hiding myself could have been used to excel, to claim my place." The words hung in the air between them, an invitation Zara wasn't ready to accept. She turned back to her vegetables, the knife moving mechanically. "Maybe it's different now," she said finally. Amara didn't press. Like a skilled physician, she had made her diagnosis and administered the medicine. Now it was time to let it work. That weekend, Zara asked her mother if she could wear her hair differently, maybe a simple ponytail instead of the traditional braids. "Is something wrong with your braids?" Amara asked, studying her daughter's face across the breakfast table, her doctor's eyes missing nothing. "No," Zara said quickly, the lie coming easier now with practice. "I just want to try something new." Amara didn't push, but that night Zara overheard her parents talking in the kitchen as she came downstairs for a glass of water. She paused on the steps, hidden in the shadows. "She's retreating," Marcus said, concern evident in his voice. "Trying to be smaller to avoid conflict. The beads, the books. She's putting away the things that make her stand out." "It breaks my heart," Amara replied, her voice tight with emotion. "I remember doing the same thing at her age. It took me years to reclaim the parts of myself I gave up trying to fit in." "Should we intervene?" Marcus asked. "Talk to the school?" There was a pause, the sound of a cup being set down on the counter. "Not yet," Amara said finally. "She needs to find her own way through this. Our job is to remind her who she is when she forgets, to keep the path home well lit. And if she keeps hiding, then we adjust," Amara said firmly. "But Zara is stronger than she knows. She comes from warriors and healers. That doesn't disappear because some mean girl at school says her hair is weird." In her bedroom, Zara pulled out the journal Ms. Chen had given each student to write about their feelings. The blank pages had intimidated her before. What if someone found it? What if someone read her private thoughts? Now, though, she uncapped her pen and began to write. the words flowing like a river breaking through a dam. I hate it here. I hate being the only black girl in my class. I hate how Madison looks at me. I hate how quiet everyone gets when I sit down. I hate how the teacher says my name wrong. I hate how I have to explain everything. My hair, my lunch, the books I read. I'm tired of being different. I'm tired of being looked at. I miss my old school where I was just Zara, not the new black girl. I miss having friends who didn't care what my hair looked like or ask weird questions about whether I live in a bad neighborhood. We don't. Our house is bigger than Madison's. Dad says I'm strong, but I don't feel strong. I feel tired. Mom says I should be proud of who I am, but right now, I just want to be invisible. The journal entry continued for pages, each line darker than the last as she pressed harder with her pen, her frustration finding physical expression in the deepening indentations on the paper. When she finally closed the journal, she felt hollowed out, emptied of the poison that had been building inside her. The next day at school, Madison accidentally knocked Zara's tray in the cafeteria, sending her food scattering across the floor. The clatter drew attention from every table. Dozens of eyes suddenly fixed on Zara kneeling in spilled milk and pasta. "Oops," Madison said with mock concern, her voice pitched to carry across the room. "I guess you'll have to go back to eating whatever strange food you brought from home." Several students laughed. Others looked away uncomfortably. Ms. Chen, supervising from across the room, started making her way toward the commotion, but she was delayed by another student needing help. Zara felt heat rising to her face. Not embarrassment this time, but anger. Pure, clarifying anger that burned away the fog of the past few days. She thought of her father's words about knowing her own strength, and for a moment, she imagined using the techniques she'd learned to put Madison on the ground with a swift takedown. Her muscles tensed with the memory of countless practice sessions, her body remembering what it felt like to stand in her power. The fantasy lasted only seconds. Violence wouldn't solve this problem. Her father had taught her that fighting was always the last resort, used only in true self-defense. But something had shifted internally, like tectonic plates realigning beneath the Earth's surface. The desire to disappear was being replaced by something else. A question of who she wanted to be in this new chapter of her life, of what story she wanted to write for herself. Someone snickered as she gathered her fallen food. Without looking up, Zara knew it was Brittany, Madison's faithful echo. She could walk away now, pretend this hadn't happened. She could continue trying to make herself small and unremarkable, hoping that eventually she would become so insignificant that even Madison wouldn't bother with her. Or she could stand up. Slowly, deliberately, Zara rose to her feet. She set the tray on the nearest table and turned to face Madison directly. The cafeteria had gone oddly quiet, the background buzz of conversation dimming as students sensed the confrontation brewing. "My name is Zara Williams," she said, her voice steady and clear in the sudden silence. "My father owns the best MMA gym in the city. My mother is a cardiologist who saves lives every day. My great-grandmother marched with Dr. King." She took a step closer to Madison, whose smug expression faltered slightly. "The food I bring from home is food my family has eaten for generations. The beads in my hair tell stories that matter to me." She paused, aware that Ms. Chen had finally arrived, hovering uncertainly at the edge of the confrontation. "You can knock over my tray, Madison. You can say mean things about my hair, or my lunch, or my books. But you can't make me ashamed of who I am." Her voice shook slightly, but she pressed on. "Not anymore." With that, she turned and walked out of the cafeteria, back straight, head high, leaving Madison standing in stunned silence. It wasn't until she reached the girls' bathroom that her composure cracked. Locking herself in a stall, she leaned against the cool metal door and finally let the tears come. Not tears of shame or defeat, but tears of release. Something had ended in that cafeteria. Her retreat, her attempt to become invisible, her refusal of the call to stand in her truth, all washed away in a moment of clarity. She didn't know what would happen next, what consequences her words might bring. But for the first time since coming to Oak Ridge, she had spoken as herself, not as the person she thought they wanted her to be. The call had been issued again. This time, she had answered. The weekend after the cafeteria confrontation arrived like a reprieve. Zara had spent the rest of the school week in a strange limbo. Madison had kept her distance, watching Zara with wary eyes while other students regarded her with a new curiosity. Ms. Chen had pulled her aside to ask if she was all right, her kind eyes full of concern. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," she had said. "But remember, I'm here if things get difficult." Standing in her bedroom on Saturday morning, Zara studied herself in the mirror. The simple ponytail of the past week was gone. Instead, her mother had spent the previous evening restoring her braids, weaving in beads of cobalt blue and amber. Colors of sky and earth, Amara had explained, to keep Zara connected to both her dreams and her roots. "Ready, little warrior?" Marcus called from downstairs. Today was different from their usual routine. Instead of training at home, he was taking her to his gym across town. Williams Combat Fitness, the business he had built from nothing after retiring from professional fighting. The gym occupied a renovated warehouse in a transitional neighborhood, its exterior painted a deep blue with gold lettering. Inside, the space opened up into a cavernous training area, heavy bags hanging in one section, a full-size competition ring in the center, and weight training equipment lining the far wall. The air smelled of sweat and disinfectant, an honest smell that Zara had associated with her father for as long as she could remember. A dozen or so fighters were warming up, their movements reflected in the mirrors that covered the walls. Unlike Oak Ridge Elementary, this place was a kaleidoscope of humanity. Men and women of various ages and ethnicities, their bodies as diverse as their backgrounds. "Your dad's place?" a woman asked, approaching with a smile. She was tall and slender, with close-cropped hair and skin the color of burnished mahogany. Moving with the balanced precision of a dancer, she extended her hand to Zara. "I'm Jade. You must be the famous Zara I've heard so much about." Zara shook her hand, surprised by the firm grip. "Famous?" Jade laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Your dad talks about you all the time. His little warrior princess who has better technique than half his adult students." Marcus grinned, unembarrassed by the revelation. "Only half?" "She's being generous. It's more like 2/3. He gestured around the gym. "I've got a women's self-defense class starting in 15 minutes. Why don't you hang out with Jade while I get things set up?" As Marcus moved away to arrange practice mats, Jade led Zara to a bench near the water cooler. "So," she said, unwrapping athletic tape from around her wrists, "how's life at Oak Ridge treating you? Your dad mentioned you transferred there recently." The question was casual, but something in Jade's tone suggested she already knew the answer. Zara shrugged, unwilling to open up to a stranger, even one who seemed so at ease in her father's world. "That good, huh?" Jade said with a knowing smile. "I went there too, you know. Class of 2003. Zara's head snapped up in surprise. "You went to Oak Ridge?" "Sure did. One of maybe 5 black kids in the whole school back then. Scholarship student from the East Side." Jade stretched her long limbs, rolling her shoulders as if shaking off an old burden. "It wasn't exactly the highlight of my childhood." "Did they—" Zara hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't sound childish. "Did people make you feel like you didn't belong?" "Every single day," Jade replied without bitterness. "The same questions about my hair, comments about being articulate, surprise when I knew the answers in class." She looked directly at Zara. "Sound familiar?" Zara nodded, a lump forming in her throat at being so completely understood. "Your dad tells me you've got skills," Jade said, changing the subject. "Want to show me a few moves?" Somewhat reluctantly, Zara followed Jade to an open section of mat. Under the older woman's watchful eye, she demonstrated the combinations her father had taught her: jab, cross, hook, proper stance transitions, a basic takedown. Jade nodded approvingly, occasionally offering small adjustments with a gentle touch. "You've got good form," Jade observed, "but I'm not seeing your spirit behind those punches. Your body knows what to do, but your heart's holding back." The assessment was so accurate that Zara felt exposed, as if Jade could see through her physical movements to the doubt churning beneath. They sat together on the bench while Marcus led his class through warm-up exercises, now watching her father in his element, confident, respected, sharing his knowledge with a diverse group of women who hung on his every word. Zara felt a flutter of pride that momentarily displaced her confusion. "How did you go from Oak Ridge to here?" Zara asked, gesturing around the gym. "Were you always into martial arts?" Jade's laugh held a hint of irony. "Hardly. I was pre-law at Howard, focused entirely on academics. Never thought about fighting until my second year of law school." "What happened?" "Life happened," Jade said simply. "I was working late at the library, walking to my car alone. Three guys decided my laptop and wallet looked interesting." Her voice remained steady, matter of fact. "I was lucky. A campus security guard intervened before things got too bad. But it shook me, made me feel powerless in a way I'd never experienced before." Zara listened, transfixed by Jade's story. Here was someone who understood not just the childhood experience of being other, but the deeper vulnerabilities that came with moving through the world in a black female body. "The next day, I signed up for a self-defense class," Jade continued. "It was supposed to be a 6-week course, just the basics. But something clicked for me. The discipline, the focus, the way it connected my mind and body." Her eyes followed the movements of the women training with Marcus. "5 years later, I was competing professionally while finishing law school." "Did you ever want to use your fighting on the people who were mean to you?" Zar asked hesitantly, giving voice to the fantasy that had briefly possessed her in the cafeteria. "Like the kids at Oak Ridge or anyone?" Jade smiled. "All the time. There were nights I'd lie awake, imagining taking down the girls who made fun of my clothes or the boys who said I only got in because of affirmative action." She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. "But that's not why we train." "That's what my dad says, but then what's the point?" "The point is knowing you could defend yourself if necessary, but choosing a better way," Jade explained, her voice taking on the measured cadence of someone imparting hard-won wisdom. "Real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about standing firmly in who you are, even when others try to make you feel small." As they talked, Zara learned that Jade was now a civil rights attorney who had started training in martial arts after facing discrimination at her predominantly white law firm. She had used her legal expertise to advocate for people whose voices were often marginalized, while using her fighting skills to coach young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. "Fighting isn't just physical," she told Zara, her eyes intense. "Sometimes the bravest thing is to speak your truth, to educate others, or to simply refuse to dim your light. Those Madison types, they want you to doubt yourself, to question whether you belong. Your resistance isn't throwing a punch, it's continuing to shine." Around them, the gym hummed with energy, bodies in motion, the rhythmic thud of gloves against pads, occasional bursts of encouragement or instruction. Zara watched a young woman about her mother's age land a perfect roundhouse kick on a pad, her face lighting up with surprise and delight at her own capability. "Everyone starts somewhere," Jade observed, following Zara's gaze. "That woman? 6 weeks ago, she could barely make a fist properly. Now look at her." The pride in Jade's voice was evident. This was clearly one of her students. "How did you help her get better?" Zara asked. "I reminded her of what she already knew, that her body was meant for more than just being looked at or judged, that she had power she hadn't accessed yet." Jade's expression softened. "Sometimes the best teaching isn't showing someone something new, but helping them recognize what's already within them." Before leaving, Jade gave Zara a book from her gym bag, a biography of Bessie Coleman, the first black woman to earn a pilot's license. "She soared when others told her to stay grounded," Jade said, placing the book in Zara's hands. "She had to go to France to learn to fly because no one in America would teach a black woman. But she didn't let that stop her. She found another way." Zara ran her fingers over the cover, tracing the image of Coleman in her leather aviator cap. Goggles pushed up on her forehead, her smile confident and challenging. "Find your way to soar, Zara," Jade said, squeezing her shoulder gently. "And remember, the sky belongs to everyone, even when some people try to convince you it doesn't." That night, as her father drove them home, Zara clutched the book to her chest, her mind full of images. Jade's confident movements, the diverse tapestry of people at the gym, Bessie Coleman defying gravity and prejudice in equal measure. "Dad?" She asked as the streetlights painted intermittent patterns across the dashboard. Can Jade come train with us sometimes? Marcus glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. I think that could be arranged. She seemed to make quite an impression on you. She understands, Zara said simply. Later before bed, Zara asked her mother to redo her braids for school Monday, this time with even more colorful beads than before. Not just blue and amber, but crimson, emerald, silver, and gold. A rainbow of declaration, a constellation of belonging. Are you sure? Amara asked, her fingers already sectioning Zara's hair with practiced precision. I thought you wanted to blend in. Zara opened Bessie Coleman's biography, showing her mother a photo of the pioneering aviator. I think I'd rather stand out, she said. Like her. Monday morning arrived with gray skies threatening rain, a stark contrast to the certainty that had crystallized within Zara over the weekend. Standing before her closet, she no longer saw the Oak Ridge uniform as a costume that might help her disappear. Instead, she recognized it as a canvas against which her true self could stand in even sharper relief. She dressed methodically, navy pleated skirt, crisp white button-up, navy cardigan with the school crest. But when she sat before her mirror, she unboxed the full collection of beads her mother had accumulated over years. There were cowrie shells passed down from her grandmother, hand-painted wooden beads from a street festival in Accra that her parents had visited before she was born, glass beads in every color that caught the light like prisms. Each had a story, a lineage, a purpose. Can you do something special today? She asked her mother, who stood in the doorway watching her with quiet pride. Amara's fingers worked magic, weaving intricate patterns that incorporated every color in Zara's collection, creating a tapestry that clicked and sang with each movement of her head. The beads were not merely decorative now. They were declarations, each one a word in a sentence that read, I am here. I belong to myself. I will not be erased. There, Amara said, stepping back to admire her work. Beautiful and bold, just like you. At breakfast, Marcus noted the transformation with a knowing smile. Someone's ready for battle today, he observed, sliding a plate of star-shaped pancakes in front of her. Not battle, Zara corrected, though she returned his smile. Just going to school as myself. The drive to Oak Ridge felt different this time. The landscape hadn't changed. The same manicured lawns, the same stately homes. But Zara's relationship to it had shifted. She no longer viewed this place as alien territory where she was an unwelcome intruder. Instead, she saw it as simply another environment through which she moved, carrying her whole self with her. Remember, Marcus said as they pulled up to the drop-off lane, true courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in the face of it, Zara finished for him, reciting one of his favorite sayings. She leaned over to kiss his cheek. I know, Dad. As she walked through the school hallways, the beads in her hair clicked softly with each step, a rhythmic counterpoint to the whispers that followed her. Some students stared openly, surprised by this bold statement after days of her attempted invisibility. Others quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the change. The sound of her beads punctuated the air like musical notes. Not a distraction, as Madison had once suggested, but a composition, an assertion, a melody of self-possession. In class, Ms. Chen's eyes widened slightly at the transformation, but her smile was immediate and genuine. I love your hair today, Zara, she said quietly as students settled into their seats. The patterns are beautiful. Madison arrived late, sliding into her seat with practiced nonchalance. Her gaze landed on Zara's hair, lingering on the constellation of colors. Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps, or calculation, before her expression settled back into careful indifference. The morning passed in a blur of lessons, each one feeling somehow more accessible to Zara than before. She raised her hand to answer questions, her voice clear and steady. The beads clicked gently as she nodded or turned her head, a sound that no longer made her self-conscious but instead reminded her of her connection to generations of women who had worn similar adornments with pride. When Ms. Chen announced a cultural heritage project where students would present something important from their family backgrounds, a flutter of anxiety passed through Zara, but it was quickly replaced by inspiration. Here was an opportunity, not a threat, a chance to educate rather than apologize, to illuminate rather than hide. You'll have 3 weeks to prepare, Ms. Chen explained, distributing colorful project guides. This can be anything that represents your family's traditions, heritage, or values. A food, an art form, a celebration, a story. Be creative, and remember that what makes us different makes our classroom richer. Zara's mind raced with possibilities. She could share the meaning behind the braid patterns, or perhaps demonstrate a traditional dance her grandmother had taught her. She could bring in the beautiful kente cloth that hung in their dining room, explaining the significance of its patterns and colors. During recess, Zara decided against her usual spot under the maple tree, which had become a place of retreat. Instead, she chose a bench near the basketball courts, Bessie Coleman's biography open in her lap, but her attention on the world around her rather than escaped into pages. It didn't take long for Madison to approach, flanked as always by Brittany and Sophia, their identical ponytails swinging in synchrony like pendulums counting down to confrontation. "Are those even more beads in your hair?" Madison asked, her voice pitched to Carrie to nearby students. "Don't they make noise when you're trying to work? It sounds like you're wearing a wind chime." Before, Zara would have retreated, minimized herself, apologized for the space and sound her existence created. Today, she marked the page in her book and closed it carefully, giving Madison her full attention. The old fear was still there, a knot in her stomach, but alongside it was something stronger. The memory of Jade's confidence, her father's teachings, her mother's quiet pride. Bessie Coleman soaring through clouds that were supposed to be off-limits to women who looked like her. "They're called cowrie shells," she explained calmly, touching one of the white shells interspersed among the colorful beads. "In my family's tradition, they represent protection and prosperity. My mom taught me how to braid them in, just like her mom taught her, and her mom before that." She spoke not with defiance but with dignity, her voice level and informative, as if she were simply sharing interesting information rather than defending herself against an attack. Madison seemed taken aback by Zara's direct response, by the absence of shame or apology in her tone. "Well, they still look weird," she muttered, but the comment lacked its usual bite. Her certainty had been punctured by Zara's unexpected poise. "And this one," Zara continued, touching a blue glass bead near her temple, "comes from Ghana, where part of my family originated. The color represents truth and wisdom." She looked directly at Madison as she said this, her gaze steady. A girl named Lily, who usually stood silently behind Madison, spoke up unexpectedly. "I think they're pretty," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Do they have special patterns? Like, does it mean something how they're arranged?" Madison shot Lily a betrayed look, but Zara seized the opening, turning toward the other girl with a genuine smile. "Yes, actually. Each pattern tells a story. This one," she traced a zigzag configuration, "represents the path of life. Never straight, always moving forward." "Cool," Lily said, taking a small step closer. "Could you show me sometime? Like how you put them in?" "Sure," Zara replied, surprised but pleased by the interest. "I could bring some extra beads tomorrow if you want to try a few in your hair." The tension in the air shifted slightly. It wasn't a victory exactly. Madison's eyes still held resentment, and several students watched warily from a distance, uncertain which way to align themselves in this subtle power redistribution. But it was a beginning, a crack in the social wall that had seemed so impenetrable just days ago. Later in the cafeteria, Zara chose a table near the center of the room rather than her usual corner spot. She unpacked her lunch, jollof rice and plantains her father had prepared that morning, no longer concerned about the strange food drawing attention. When Lily hesitantly approached with her tray, asking if she could join her, Zara nodded, making space with a welcoming gesture. That afternoon, Zara asked her father to help her prepare something special for the Cultural Heritage Project, a demonstration combining traditional West African dance movements with the disciplined forms of martial arts that had become part of her daily life. In the basement gym, they experimented with ways to blend the fluid rhythms of dance her grandmother had taught her with the precise movements of her martial arts training. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked as they took a water break, studying her with thoughtful eyes. "It's brave to showcase your culture so openly, Some kids might not understand. Zara wiped sweat from her forehead, considering his question seriously. The old instinct to protect herself through invisibility flickered briefly, a ghost of the fear that had governed her first weeks at Oak Ridge. But it no longer held the same power over her decisions. "I'm done hiding, Dad," she said finally, meeting his gaze with newfound certainty. "Like you and Jade said, real strength is standing in who you are." She was crossing a threshold, from trying to be invisible to choosing to be gloriously seen, from accepting the narrative others had written for her to authoring her own story, from living in fear of difference to celebrating the unique constellation of experiences and heritage that made her who she was. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the basement windows. But inside, in the sacred space where her father had taught her discipline and self-respect, Zara moved through the combined forms they had created, part dance, part martial art, wholly herself. The beads in her hair kept time with her movements, a percussion accompaniment to this new chapter she was writing with her body, her voice, her presence. She was still afraid. The path ahead would not be smooth. Madison's hostility, the whispers, the challenges of being other in a space designed for sameness, none of these had disappeared. But Zara was no longer allowing fear to dictate her choices. She had crossed the threshold, and there would be no going back. The weeks leading up to the cultural heritage presentations unfolded like a hero's journey in miniature, each day bringing new challenges and unexpected alliances. Zara's declaration of self in the playground had rippled outward, subtly altering the social landscape of Oak Ridge Elementary's fifth grade in ways she could never have anticipated. Lily began sitting with Zara at lunch, their conversations evolving from hesitant small talk to genuine exchanges. She was fascinated by Zara's books and the foods her father packed, asking questions not with the clinical detachment of an observer studying something exotic, but with the warm curiosity of someone discovering a new world adjacent to her own. "My mom never cooks," Lily confessed one day, eyeing Zara's container of fragrant stew with barely concealed envy. "It's always takeout or the housekeeper makes something boring. Your lunch looks like it has actual love in it." Zara, surprised by the vulnerability in Lily's voice, offered her a taste. The simple act of sharing food, this most ancient form of human connection, bridged cultures and histories in a way that explanations never could. The next day, Lily asked if Zara could show her how to wear a few beads in her straight blonde hair. By week's end, a small blue bead dangled from one of Lily's thin braids, a tiny revolution in its own right. Then there was Jamal, a quiet Egyptian-American boy who had kept to himself most of the year. He approached Zara during library period, shyly showing her a book about ancient Egyptian martial arts. "I train in Krav Maga at Phoenix Combat Center," he revealed, his voice barely above a whisper. "3 times a week. I've seen your dad at tournaments. He's kind of a legend." A burst of pride warmed Zara's chest. "You train too? That's awesome." The discovery of this shared experience created an immediate bond, a recognition of kindred spirits. During recess, they began practicing basic forms together, drawing curious glances from other students who had never seen martial arts up close. Even Ms. Chen had become something of an ally, quietly encouraging Zara's newfound confidence. She had added books featuring diverse protagonists to the classroom library and paired Zara with Lily for the upcoming science fair, creating space for their budding friendship to grow. But as Zara gained allies, Madison's antagonism only intensified. The social queen bee had recognized the threat to her carefully constructed hierarchy. Zara wasn't merely existing in her space anymore. She was thriving, drawing others into her orbit. The whispers began soon after Zara started practicing martial arts moves with Jamal at recess. "She's probably violent," Madison told a cluster of girls near the water fountain. "My mom says those combat sports make kids aggressive. That's why they had to leave their old school." The lie was strategic and effective, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of students who might otherwise have been drawn to Zara's authenticity. Several children who had started greeting her in the hallways now gave her a wider berth, eyeing her with newfound wariness. Zara felt the shift, the subtle cooling of potential connections, but refused to let it deter her. People will believe what they want to believe, her mother had taught her. Your job isn't to convince everyone, it's to know your own truth. The greatest test came during gym class on a rain-soaked Tuesday, 2 weeks before the cultural heritage presentations. The students were divided into teams for a relay race, running back and forth across the squeaking gymnasium floor. Zara's natural athleticism made her a strong anchor for her team, much to Madison's visible annoyance. As Zara rounded the final turn of her leg, Madison, who had finished her own run, deliberately extended her foot into Zara's path. The trip was subtle enough to look accidental to most observers, but the intention was clear in Madison's eyes, a calculated flash of malice as Zara's momentum carried her forward. The fall was spectacular and painful. Zara's knee hit the hardwood first, followed by her palms as she tried to break her impact. The skin tore on contact, blood blooming through her torn leggings. Pain shot up her leg, but worse than the physical hurt was the public humiliation. The gasps from classmates, the coach's concerned approach, Madison's perfectly performed look of shock and dismay. "Oh no, are you okay?" Madison asked, her voice dripping with false concern as she knelt beside Zara. Then in a whisper meant only for Zara's ears, "Why don't you use your karate on me, warrior princess?" "Oh, wait, you can't, can you? Not unless you want to get expelled." The taunt stung worse than the injury, its accuracy striking Zara like a second blow. All her training, all her physical discipline, useless against this type of attack. In the world of combat sports, there were rules, respect, clear boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. Here in the murky waters of preteen social warfare, those who broke the rules often won, especially when they did so with plausible deniability. The gym teacher missed the exchange, focused on examining Zara's bleeding knee. "Let's get you to the nurse," she said, helping Zara to her feet. "That's a nasty scrape." "I'll help her," Lily volunteered, rushing forward to support Zara's other side. As they made their slow way toward the exit, Zara caught Madison watching them, satisfaction evident in her smirk. Something shifted inside Zara in that moment. Not defeat, but a deeper understanding of the battle she was fighting. This wasn't a match with clear rules and a referee. It was a different kind of struggle, one that required not just physical courage but moral strength. In the nurse's office, as antiseptic stung her torn skin, Lily squeezed Zara's hand. "I saw what she did," she whispered. "Madison tripped you on purpose. You should tell Ms. Chen." Zara shook her head. "It would only make things worse." "That's what Madison counts on," Lily argued, surprising Zara with her insight. "She does mean stuff and gets away with it because nobody wants to make things worse. That's how she stays in charge." The words echoed in Zara's mind throughout the day, joining forces with memories of Jade's advice and her father's teachings. Was staying silent really being strong, or was it another form of retreat? Was avoiding confrontation wisdom or fear disguised as strategy? That evening, as Marcus cleaned the scrape on her knee, applying antibiotic ointment with gentle fingers, Zara finally confessed the full extent of Madison's bullying, not just today's incident, but the accumulation of slights, whispers, and calculated social exclusion. Her father's jaw tightened, but his hands remained gentle. The contrast reminded Zara of what he had taught her about controlled power, the discipline of containing one's strength, using it judiciously rather than reactively. "Sometimes the hardest fights are the ones where we choose not to strike back," he said after listening to her story. His eyes, normally warm, had hardened with protective anger, but his voice remained measured. "But Zara, there's a difference between physical fighting and standing up for yourself. Not telling a teacher isn't being strong. It's allowing the behavior to continue." "But what if it just makes everything worse?" Zara asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if everyone thinks I'm a tattletale or a victim?" Marcus considered this, respecting her concern rather than dismissing it. "That's a risk," he acknowledged. "But there's also the risk of what happens when behavior like Madison's goes unchecked, not just to you but to others who might not be as strong." He shifted to sit beside her on the couch, their shoulders touching in silent solidarity. "In the ring, we face one opponent at a time with rules and referees. Life isn't that simple. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't throwing a punch or even blocking one. It's speaking the truth when silence would be easier. Together, they called the school and arranged a meeting with Miss Chen for the following morning. Zara's stomach churned with anxiety as she imagined the conversation, the potential outcomes. Madison's reaction when she discovered that Zara had broken the unwritten rule of silence. But alongside the fear was a new sensation, the quiet certainty that she was doing the right thing, not just for herself, but for the bigger principles at stake. Ms. Chen listened carefully to Zara's experiences, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes reflected both concern and a certain sadness, as if Zara's story confirmed suspicions she had long harbored. "This stops now," Ms. Chen assured them when Zara had finished speaking. "And Zara, thank you for your courage in speaking up. It takes true strength to break silence around these kinds of behaviors." The next day, Madison was noticeably subdued. Zara later learned she had been required to stay after school for a discussion about respect and inclusion, and that her parents had been contacted. The playground hierarchy didn't crumble overnight. Social orders rarely do. But a foundation had been shaken, small fissures appearing in what had seemed impenetrable. But the real test came the following week, as the cultural heritage presentations began. Student after student shared family recipes, displayed photos of relatives, or demonstrated traditional clothing. The presentations ranged from deeply researched to hastily assembled, from passionate to perfunctory. When it was Madison's turn, she presented her family's Scottish ancestry with unexpected hesitancy. She displayed a tartan swatch and played tinny bagpipe music from her phone, her voice lacking its usual confidence. For the first time, Zara saw something recognizable in Madison's carefully maintained facade, the universal human desire to belong, to be valued for one's authentic self. The realization didn't excuse Madison's behavior, but it added dimension to Zara's understanding of her adversary. Everyone, even Madison Baker, was fighting their own battles, carrying their own insecurities beneath protective armor. Then it was Zara's turn. Standing before her classmates, she explained the significance of the braiding traditions passed down through generations of women in her family. With Amara's help, she had created a poster showing the different patterns and their meanings. "And now," she said, taking a deep breath, "I'd like to show you how my family's heritage combines with something else that's important to us, the discipline and respect of martial arts." As Marcus had taught her, she centered herself with a deep breath, then moved through a series of forms that blended traditional dance with precise martial arts techniques. Her movements told a story of strength, resilience, and cultural pride. When she finished, the classroom was silent for a moment before erupting into applause. Even Madison seemed impressed, though she tried to hide it. Miss Chen wiped a tear from her eye. "That was beautiful, Zara. Thank you for sharing your heritage and your strength with us." After class, several students surrounded Zara with questions about her training. Madison stood at the edge of the group, watching. "Could you teach me how to do that kick?" Lily asked excitedly. "Me too," added Jamal. Zara caught Madison's eye across the circle of students. Instead of the expected hostility, she saw something else, perhaps a grudging respect or even curiosity. As spring bloomed across Lakeside, the landscape of Zara's life had transformed alongside the season. The brown grass surrendered to vibrant green, bare branches erupted with blossoms, and dormant bulbs pushed through soil towards sunlight. Nature's annual resurrection story played out in yards and parks, a visible reminder that periods of dormancy and challenge eventually yield to renewal and growth. For Zara, this external transformation mirrored her internal journey. The fearful girl who had arrived at Oak Ridge Elementary 6 months earlier, desperate to blend in, to minimize her differences, to escape notice, had blossomed into someone who moved through the world with quiet confidence, neither flaunting nor hiding the heritage that shaped her. The basement training sessions with her father continued, but now they occasionally included Lily and Jamal, who had become her closest friends. Marcus taught them not just techniques, but the philosophy behind the practice. Discipline, respect, and the responsibility that came with knowing how to defend oneself. In these sessions, Zara sometimes found herself taking the lead, demonstrating forms to her friends with the natural authority of someone comfortable in her expertise. "You're becoming quite the sensei," Marcus observed one evening after Lily and Jamal had gone home. Pride radiated from his smile, warming Zara more deeply than praise for any physical achievement could have done. "I'm just sharing what you taught me," she replied, helping him roll up the practice mats. "That's how wisdom works," he said. "It grows by being given away." Madison's bullying had largely subsided after the school intervened, though there remained a certain coolness between them. The social hierarchy hadn't been completely dismantled. Such entrenched systems rarely collapse all at once. But it had been sufficiently disrupted to create spaces where new connections could form, where different types of value could be recognized. The most surprising development came during a group project in science class, where students were randomly assigned to research endangered ecosystems. Zara found herself partnered with Madison and two other students, an arrangement that initially filled her with dread. Would Madison sabotage their work? Create an atmosphere so uncomfortable that nothing could be accomplished? Instead, a strange truce emerged as they focused on the shared goal of creating a presentation on coral reef conservation. Madison, it turned out, had visited the Great Barrier Reef on a family vacation and had developed a genuine passion for marine ecosystems. When another group criticized their research methodology unfairly, it was Zara who spoke up in defense of their work. "Why did you help me?" Madison had asked afterward, genuinely puzzled. "I've been nothing but mean to you." They stood alone in the school library, surrounded by books but separated from their usual social contexts. Just two girls having an honest conversation without the weight of their usual roles pressing down on them. "Because standing up for what's right isn't just about defending yourself," Zara had replied, echoing her father's words. "It's about defending others too, even when it's difficult." She paused, meeting Madison's eyes directly. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, Madison, even when they haven't always shown it to others." Something shifted in Madison's expression. Not a dramatic transformation, but a subtle softening, like ice beginning to thaw at its edges. "I guess I've been pretty awful to you," she admitted grudgingly. "Yes," Zara agreed, neither minimizing the truth nor wielding it as a weapon. "You have." The acknowledgement hung between them, neither an accusation nor an absolution, simply a fact that both could recognize. "My mom says I need to work on my social skills," Madison said, the words clearly borrowed from an adult conversation. "She says I'm too aggressive sometimes." Zara nearly smiled at the irony. Madison's mother worried about aggression, while Zara's father taught actual combat techniques as tools for building confidence and self-control. But she recognized the tentative vulnerability in Madison's admission. "My dad says that strength without control isn't really strength at all," she offered. "That's why discipline is so important in martial arts." Madison nodded, absorbing this. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was a beginning, a recognition of common humanity across the divisions they had both participated in creating and maintaining. The true transformation, however, was within Zara herself. The girl who had once tried to shrink to avoid attention now walked the school hallways with confidence, her beaded braids clicking with each step. The sounds no longer made her self-conscious. They had become a personal soundtrack, a rhythm that reminded her with each movement of who she was and where she came from. She had started a small lunchtime club where she taught interested classmates about different cultural braiding techniques, creating a space where diversity was celebrated rather than questioned. What had begun as Madison's attempt to shame her, "What's with your hair?" had been alchemized into an opportunity to educate and connect. Jamal had joined her in offering basic martial arts instruction during some recesses, teaching interested students simple forms and explaining the philosophical foundations of various traditions. Ms. Chen had supported these initiatives, recognizing them as student-led enrichment that fostered both physical skills and cultural understanding. For the school talent show in late April, Zara choreographed a group performance combining dance and martial arts with Lily, Jamal, and surprisingly, Madison, who had approached Zara hesitantly, asking to participate. "I want to learn," Madison had said simply. "About the martial arts part, I mean. My mom says I need to channel my energy better." The request might have contained seeds of her mother's social engineering, but Zara recognized the genuine interest beneath the parental prompting. Teaching Madison required a different kind of strength than fighting her head would have. the strength to move beyond past hurts, to see the person beneath the behavior, to offer knowledge without resentment. The night of the talent show, Marcus and Amara sat in the front row, watching as their daughter led her group through the intricate routine they had practiced for weeks. Zara moved with a grace and confidence that brought tears to her mother's eyes, not just executing the physical movements perfectly, but radiating a poise that came from deeper self-knowledge. "She's found her warrior spirit," Marcus whispered. "She had it all along," Amara replied. "She just needed to discover it for herself." The performance blended elements of traditional West African dance with the disciplined forms of mixed martial arts, creating something entirely new, yet rooted in ancient traditions. The audience, initially uncertain how to respond to this unconventional offering, burst into enthusiastic applause as the final sequence ended with all four performers in perfect synchronization. After the performance, as the audience continued to clap, Ms. Chen presented Zara with a special recognition award for her contributions to building community within the classroom. "Zara has taught us all something important," Ms. Chen announced, her voice carrying through the auditorium, "that our differences aren't just to be tolerated, they're to be celebrated and shared, and that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from standing proudly in who you are while helping others to do the same." The words washed over Zara like a blessing, affirming the journey she had undertaken. She accepted the small plaque with gratitude, but the real reward was in what she saw around her. Lily standing taller than she had at the beginning of the year. Jamal smiling openly instead of hiding behind his usual reserve. Even Madison showing a different side of herself, one capable of following rather than always needing to lead. Later that evening, as they drove home from the school, Zara gazed out the window at the neighborhood that had once felt so foreign, but now was beginning to feel like home. The same houses stood in their perfect rows, the same manicured lawns stretched between sidewalk and front door, but they no longer seemed like barriers to belonging. They were simply structures, neither inherently welcoming nor inherently excluding. The true landscape that mattered was the human one. The connections formed, the understanding fostered, the spaces created where authentic selves could be recognized and valued. "Dad," she asked, "remember when you said this journey was mine to discover?" Marcus nodded, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. "I think I understand now," she continued. "The fighting techniques aren't the most important part of what you taught me." "What was the most important part, little warrior?" he asked. Zara thought for a moment, her fingers absently touching the beads in her hair. "That sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting back. Sometimes it's staying true to yourself when it would be easier not to. And sometimes it's helping others find their strength, even when they've been unkind to you." Marcus smiled with pride. "That's wisdom beyond your years." At home, Zara added a new entry to the journal she had once used to record her sorrows. Now it chronicled her journey, not just the challenges, but the victories, both large and small. Tonight's entry ended with the words, "I used to think a warrior was someone who knew how to fight. Now I know a warrior is someone who knows when to fight, when to speak, when to teach, and when to extend a hand. My dad taught me the forms, but my heart taught me how to use them. And that's the real warrior's journey, finding the strength not just in your fists, but in your voice, your mind, and your ability to create change." The beads in her hair clicked softly as she closed the journal. No longer a sound that made her self-conscious, but a rhythm that reminded her of who she was and where she came from. A heritage carried forward, a strength discovered, a warrior's heart fully awakened. In the morning, she would face new challenges, continue building new connections, keep discovering new dimensions of her own capacity. The journey wasn't over. Such journeys never truly ended. But she had returned from her first great adventure, carrying an elixir of wisdom that would nourish not just her own growth, but the community around her. Like all true heroes, Zara had discovered that the ultimate purpose of the journey was not merely personal transformation, but bringing gifts back to the ordinary world. Gifts of courage, understanding, and the profound knowledge that difference, when embraced rather than feared, enriches rather than diminishes the human experience.